Welcome to the Erin Wilson Show. I'm Erin, designer, creative strategist, intuitive, and the CEO of Erin Rachel Designs. This is a space for reflection, insights, and storytelling, with the intention of giving you the keys you need to unlock your creative potential and become the creative CEO of your own life. Hi, and welcome back. Wherever you're listening from, I hope you're having a great week. I hope you are feeling like the creative CEO of your life. And if you're not, I hope that what we talk about on this show is helping you get there. On today's episode, I want to share a bit more about myself and what I'm trying to build in my life, in my business, to build that connection of who am I, why am I doing this, and maybe some of that you'll be able to resonate with as well. I have started looking at myself as a tree of sorts with these branches that extend out. And those branches are the different parts of me that end up being a facet of my business somewhere along a spectrum. The reason I've started looking at it this way is that in the past, I've struggled to understand how my more structured masculine energy side of myself, in terms of having my design agency that I'm building, how that coexists with my more feminine flowing energy side of things, my sacral rose business, where my mission is to support individuals in embodying this type of energy to become the creative CEOs of their own life, to activate their creative power so that they can live a life that's meaningful and in alignment with them. And there are clear similarities and overlaps between these, but in the past, I've seen them as more separate, and I struggled with, will the corporate clients that I work with in the design side understand and accept the side of me that's more intuitive and what you might call woo-woo? So in the past, I felt like I need to separate those things, maybe even hide the other side, depending on what room I'm in, who I'm talking to, who I'm working with. And as it stands right now, these do exist as separate containers. However, they can come together, they can converge and work together. And I'm no longer concerned about hiding one side of myself from customers or potential customers and partners that I'm working with on the other side. And so, again, I have Erin Rachel Designs. That's my design business that I have built over the last 11 years at the time of recording this episode. So I started it back in 2015. And in most of this time, I've been freelancing as a designer, which has been great. Something I've learned about myself is I thrive when I work on my own. I do like collaborating with others, but I like a lot of alone time to just be in my creative space, in my element. And I've also learned that I really love a lot of variety and a lot of change. And that may be as a result of my ADHD. I'm sure it may just be my personality. It could be a combination. But I'm really working to lean into what works for me, what sets me apart, and what helps me thrive. And so I consider Erin Rachel Designs more like the masculine energy container side of my business, or this tree. The other side is Sacral Rose. And then I also have this podcast, which I see as a bridge between the two, where we talk about all of the things: leadership, entrepreneurship, being a founder, designing a life that works for you, and embodying the type of person that you are looking to become. And what that looks like. Intuition as well, navigating your life and your business with intuition. I also touch on things like manifestation, supporting the nervous system, lots of topics that really can be incorporated into all of the above. My vision with this podcast is that it will attract the right people who do appreciate all those facets of me and can relate to them. So it's really been a journey of self-acceptance, vulnerability, coming into greater alignment with who I truly am, what works for me, what makes me feel good. And I'm really learning that the more we're just authentically ourselves in every room, in every situation, the more we're going to attract the right people and the right opportunities to us naturally. Of course, that can be scary and uncomfortable because in that process, we're going to potentially lose relationships, lose opportunities, or we won't attract the types of people and opportunities that we've maybe been used to. So at first, that can be uncomfortable, but then you start to see the right ones emerge, which is really exciting. And it's a really positive confirmation that all that work that you've been doing is paying off. So if you're kind of in that in between phase right now, hang in there. As long as you're following your intuition and you're doing what feels right and aligned for you, it will pay off. Of course, a healthy amount of discernment is necessary. And discernment is a tough lesson to learn in navigating relationships, business decisions. And it all comes down to that intuition, learning what your intuition sounds and feels like in your body. And that's a whole other topic that we can get into some other time. I'm sure I will. But that's me in a nutshell in terms of what I'm trying to build or the different facets of me. And on the design side of things, I am positioning my business as a virtual creative agency. I have a team now to support me in executing the work, which is very exciting. On the sacral row side of things, I am revamping my website where I will be releasing my new signature offering called One-on-One Creative Activation and Alignment Sessions. So you can learn more about that on my website. These sessions are very much intuitively guided, very personalized, and I meet you where you are in your journey and in your energy. And the purpose is to help you activate your creative power. In that process, we may ebb and flow through different modalities, different formats, such as gentle discussion, guided meditation or visualization, creative exercises, intuitive movement in the body, quiet energy work. They're 90-minute sessions, so we go deep together, and the intent is that you'll always get out of it what you need because I meet you where you are and not because I follow my own intuition in terms of how the session flows. Also, on that side of things, I am working on my book, which I've talked about in other episodes, which will include intuitively designed art pieces, channeled messages, and affirmations to help you step into and embody your most creative, authentic self. And again, help you become the creative CEO of your life and design your life the way that you truly want. Under Sacral Rose, I've also recently launched a Substack community called The Pollen Path. And this is designed to be more vulnerable, personal content where I share more deeply about what's going on with me. The content carries the same sort of frequencies as what will be in my book. And I'll also along the way include little content sneak peeks. So it's supposed to be like a little trail leading up to when my book is released. And I anticipate I'll continue with it after as well. But I really want to nurture a tighter community of individuals who are called to the body of work that I am working on, and to just have somewhere to share more deeply about the inner workings of my mind in a little more detail than what I might talk about here on the podcast or on social media. And of course, with this podcast, I consider it as the bridge between the two different sides of my business, where we talk about leadership, becoming the creative CEO of your own life, intuition, embodying that version of yourself that you are trying to become. So it's like the masculine, feminine energy and the structure and intuition coming together. So I wanted to share that. And I also want to share a new approach that I have felt called to implement in terms of how I go about content. Content strategy is something that's just honestly never really meshed well with me. I've never found a system or a process that has gotten me excited, at least not in a sustainable way. And so what I've come up with is what I'm calling a weekly inquiry. It may be a bi-weekly inquiry. I'm not going to force too much structure around it because in the past that has not worked for me. I need freedom, flexibility, but within a structure that works, if that makes sense. So, what the weekly inquiry will be is an overarching theme that's been on my mind or coming up in my life or in conversation with other people that I feel called to go deeper within and share about. That weekly inquiry can then be discussed or shared across the different channels that I have right now. So, the inquiry that's come up for me this week is the concept of there being room for all of us. And where this really came from is some controversial information that I learned about an author and another content creator that I follow and really enjoy. Her name is Florence Given. I love her work. She also is a beautiful artist. Her brand is just very magnetic. It's very authentic. I came across her book, Women Living Deliciously, which I really, really love. She does have other books as well and a podcast. The controversial information that I came across was actually from, I think, 2020, where there's debate over whether Florence's work was plagiarized from this other author, Chidera Egeru, also known as the Slum Flower. She's also active in the feminist space. I'm not going to get into all the details of the story because I didn't go down a super deep rabbit hole with it. And so I don't feel that I can speak really in detail to the situation. I know that some of the themes are overall systemic issues and disparities in the publishing industry, which again, I don't know enough about. I wouldn't be surprised if that was a problem, unfortunately. And I think it's good that stories like this are bringing awareness to that so that it can shift in the right direction. But what came up for me in discovering this information is, of course, there's so much, there's emotional layers and nuance here that it's not an easy situation to navigate. So obviously there's concerns around plagiarism. There's concerns around feminism in terms of, is Florence Given truly acting as a feminist in this situation? And of course, issues around race. So again, highly complex situation. But what was coming up for me was just how common it is for women to feel a sense of competition against each other. And I had this realization around young girls are put in pageants where they are taught to compete against each other literally, to be the prettiest, the smartest, the most talented. Now, I know not every young girl participates in beauty pageants. I didn't, but there is a huge culture around that. And even in terms of, sometimes dance, gymnastics, things that are more stereotypically popular amongst girls, encourages that competition against each other. Whereas boys are more stereotypically and historically encouraged to play team sports, where they work as a team to still to win and compete against another team. But that other team is also another group where they're working together. And there's so many cases where even though, let's say, one person can score the winning goal, they're lifting that person up and cheering them on and celebrating that they got there together and that that person did that final push. So I thought it was really interesting. Now, of course, girls play team sports, boys do dance, gymnastics, pageants, all that stuff, right? And I'm more speaking to what's been more traditional or stereotypical in terms of how boys versus girls are raised, conditioned. And so I found that really interesting. Of course, there is the racial element to this as well that plays a role. But beyond this particular case, there are a lot of issues and debates online around similar themes of envy, competition, who did it better, who wore it better, is also something that was really common to see in magazines. Maybe it still is. I don't really read fashion or pop culture magazines these days, but who wore it better was something that I saw in every issue that I would read or on blogs. So again, I feel like there's this deeper issue of women being conditioned to compete against one another and men being conditioned to work more collaboratively and to celebrate each other and work together. I'm not approaching this in a black and white kind of way. I understand that both can exist on either side. Again, just speaking to overall themes. And so my weekly inquiry is the idea that there's room for all of us. And in my last episode, I talked about envy and how envy can be used as just data information. If we can just remove the emotion from it or shift that emotion from a negative to a positive, where instead of focusing on the other person that we are having envy towards, shifting that inward to the emotion of excitement and anticipation, because that envy is telling you that that's something that you want for yourself. And when it comes to this specific instance of potential plagiarism and having a message or material that's similar to someone in the same space, the idea that there's room for all of us to succeed, there's room for all of us to share the same message. And in fact, that's amazing if we can come together and share the same message, but in our own way, right? As long as we aren't actually plagiarizing, but saying, yes, I'm inspired by what this woman is doing. I'm inspired by her mission. I'm inspired by her voice and how she uses it. And I want to join that movement. I want to join that mission and do it in my own way. And that way we can make a bigger impact together. And I think there is so much opportunity to collaborate where, let's say in the scenario where you released a book and then someone else releases a book and you realize maybe your aesthetics are similar, your messaging similar, you have a shared network, shared interests. There's an opportunity there to say, hey, I noticed this. I think it's great what you're doing. I'm really excited about what I'm doing. What are some ways we can come together and collaborate that will benefit both of us and benefit the audience that we're trying to reach? How can we make an even bigger impact by coming together, working together, and having fun with it? And so this is my inquiry for this week. Again, coming from a tricky, controversial situation, but how can we take that concept and apply it across the board, especially with the social media scene? Because it's, we're looking at people's highlight reels. I think people are getting more vulnerable and real on social media, which I love to see. I try to do that myself as well. But we still have a long way to go. And it's so easy to, when we're sitting behind a screen, say things that we just wouldn't say in person. Because it's so easy to forget that there's a human on the other side of that screen. So how can we approach being visible online, communicating online, building our businesses, building our relationships, and working towards our mission in a way that embodies that idea of there being room for all of us to succeed? Male, female, any gender, doesn't matter. There is room for everyone to apply their own flavor to a message. And I like the idea of, if you were to think of the world as a garden, it's really healthy for the ecosystem to have a lot of different varieties of plants and even to rotate crops, right? So that it helps keep the soil healthy. And there's certain plants that actually grow stronger by having certain other plants nearby. And so I think that we can choose to see ourselves and the collective in this way, where we grow stronger together. We can grow side by side, and we each have access to the sun and water and the nutrients that we need. and we can all have that visibility. Like if you had a garden with just one type of flower, it's a lot less interesting than a garden with an abundance of varieties of flowers. And so I want to leave you with where in your life might envy, competition, or comparison be limiting your potential? What might be there for you to discover around that? That's all for today. Thank you for listening.